review. Now, I don't believe I'm actually saying this, but clearly amongst the three of us, there is a secret closeted sports lover. And I'm clearly not talking about you, Dave. Am I, Peter Krausz?
What are you insinuating?
Exactamundo. I certainly am. You and I saw this show, saw this movie, and you really got a bit of a penchant for it, did you not? So have you hit a ball in anger since you saw the Phantom of the Open?
I've never played golf and never will start.
Well, neither had the star of the show here, Maurice Flitcroft. I can't believe that this guy existed. Dave, you've seen this one. Before seeing the Phantom of the Open, which runs for 106 minutes and is rated M, had you ever heard his name?
No, I thought the only sports pest was Peter Hoare.
Well, neither had I. And how could this story have escaped us? I know it happened a long time ago, but still, this is a charming, good-natured crowd pleaser. The adage behind it is that truth is stranger than fiction. I mean, I looked at it and I said, seriously? It can't possibly be true. Peter, if I dreamt up this screenplay and put it out there for you, you'd say, come on, nobody's going to buy that, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. It feels like a fantasy rather than a real true story, and yet it is.
Exactly. It's based around the worst professional golfer of all time. Peter, I urge you to take up the club and see whether you can beat him. Anyway, having said that, there's no ifs, buts or maybes. This guy doesn't know how to play professional golf. He isn't a professional golfer, and yet he plays in one of the great tournaments of the world. His name, as I mentioned, Maurice Flitcroft, played by Mike Rylance, who is so good in Bridge of Spies. Now, Flitcroft was a crane operator, and you'd describe American as an unrelenting optimist from a port town in Cumbria in England called Barrow-in-Furness. Got some rather special names in England, who, after decades of work, saw his job as a crane operator disappear. He's got a devoted wife called Jean, played by Sally Hawkins, who also, I don't think she's made a bad movie. Phenomenal. She backs him to find something new, whatever that might be. And one night, late in the evening, he's just turned on this late-night sports telecast. And that subsequently changed his life. I'm not just talking for then and now, but for the whole of the rest of his life. Flitcroft watched Tom Watson claim the 1975 British Open Golf Championship at Carnoustie in Scotland. And at that point, he had an epiphany. Even though he'd never picked up a golf club, he decided he'd play in the following year's British Open. And that decision resulted in a really, really wild ride for him, for his wife, for their 3 children, and for his friends. The whole story unfolds via a sit-down, one-on-one American television interview which looks back at what went down. Colourful does not describe the half of it. The script is by Simon Farnaby, who was responsible for Paddington 2, based upon the book The Phantom of the Open, Maurice Flitcroft, the World's Worst Golfer, that Simon Farnaby and Scott Murray wrote. It is a delightful script, and the directions from Craig Roberts, who did Eternal Beauty, and I thought that was full of virtue as well. Aren't the performances of the 2 leads finely tuned and memorable, Peter Krausz?
They definitely are. They inhabit their roles, their characters so well. And it's so interesting to see the way they interact and the way that this man who's a bit of a dreamer, who wants to be a professional golfer and to be recognised as one, to see his story progress is really quite enjoyable. It's also, the family byplay is worth experiencing as well, especially as he adopts Sally Hawkins' son when they marry. And also, he has 2 other sons who are twins, who are disco dancers. And I thought, surely not. And yet, all completely true.
Oh, look, disco dancing, I'm sorry. I grew up in this era where I was disco dancing, and I'm trying to remember the place in Kooyong Road that I used to go to all the time, and they had that silver, what do you call it, the ball, the disco ball with the window, the mirrored disco ball. That was the mainstay of this particular place. Oh, it's driving me nuts. Peter, did you not, this is your era, did you never go disco dancing?
No, unfortunately, I'm very boring.
Oh, no. I had the platform shoes, which I've still got, hoping they can come back into fashion. I had the wide as wide can be flares. Now, you must have worn flares. Come on. Is there a photo of you wearing flares, Peter?
I don't think there is.
Now, Dave, would you not like to see Peter dressed up in platform shoes and flares? Wouldn't that be a sight for sore eyes?
With some blue suede shoes, yep.
Exactly.
Very sore eyes.
Yes. No, please go on. The Phantom of the Open. Go for it, Peter.
Look, a very enjoyable story. It's the period that it's set in the 70s and then in the 80s is just very well recreated. And I also must commend the use of particular songs that are integrated into the plot lines set in the 70s and 80s. I think it is a very well put together package, which makes it such an enjoyable film about a dreamer who, even if you fail, can still succeed.
Absolutely. Well, there's a little bit of skullduggery that goys on here. I mean, Rylance is really agreeably naive and unaffected. I mean, it just sort of washes over him. And I just thought Hawkins excelled as his good-natured and supportive wife. There's something about their authenticity, Dave. That's what really struck me. Whenever these guys are on the stage or screen, you really believe who they play.
Definitely. I thought this was a very special comedy, and I thought this is what comedy should be like. I don't like those over-the-top comedies that people like Adam Sandler and people like that do. And it's hardly surprising that Craig Roberts knows how to do a comedy like this because, of course, very early on in his acting career, he came under the tutelage of Ben Stiller. And I think that Stiller family comedy style has been passed down to Craig Roberts because of that. Mark Rylance was absolutely fantastic here, and I think the key to this film working was that Roberts, as a director and also his screenwriter, knows how to mix comedy and drama. Yes, you could have made this movie as an outrageous comedy where it was just about this idiot playing golf, but instead, there's heartfelt moments in this film. I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't seen the film, but there's a really heartfelt moment in this where the main character realizes that he's possibly failed as a father. And it's one of the most touching scenes that you'll see in cinema this year, yet it's in a film that would be largely described as a comedy. So, to me, it's the perfect bit of screenwriting on how to write a comedy, and it also shows how to direct a comedy, and it also shows how to act in a comedy.
Absolutely. I mean, the secondary players with their inflated characterizations also have a spring in their step. That's in keeping with the tenor of the picture. What about Rhys Ifans, who I've always enjoyed, who plays this pompous secretary of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club of St Andrews? Just a terrific role that he could get his teeth into. And it speaks volumes, this whole film. It's really quirky, Dave, isn't it?
It is, and that's what I mean. Craig Roberts grew up making in movies like Submarine and things like that, so that quirkiness has rubbed off onto him, and that's kind of what I meant by when I said about the Stiller family comedy. Very early on, before Ben Stiller became, I would say, Americanized with his comedy, he did this kind of quirky humor with his very early films, and that's what's coming across here quite well, and I'm glad that Craig Roberts has taken that way of doing comedy because, of course, he was in stuff like Bad Neighbors and that as well in America. So he's kind of seen both sides of comedy, and thankfully he's settled on doing it the quirky, good style.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, if a number of the episodes dealt with in this screenplay are shown at the end of the movie with the real-life Morris Flitcroft, I thought that was terrific. That's how it ends, as it should end. It's got charm written all over it. It's bound to engage an appreciative audience. There's going to be a lot of people who love this film, and it might be a smaller movie, but I reckon it's going to get a big audience, and it deserves to, because it'll be word of mouth. It's one of those movies that you've got to be saying to people, you've got to go along and see The Phantom of the Open. It runs again for 106 minutes, and it is rated M. So, Peter Krausz, a score out of 10, please.
Yes, I really enjoyed seeing at the end the real characters. And I must say this film was a little reminiscent of the Ealing comedies of the 1950s in the UK. So that tradition has sort of carried on. Look, I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 8 out of 10.
And Dave Griffiths.
Yeah, like Peter, I really thought this was a really, really special film. I'm giving it 8 out of 10 as well.
And so am I. Oh, my golly. Is this a first? 3 8s.